going to move on to something a little bit different, but probably related, is programming. Okay, so when we say programming, you can think of different things that are programmed, right? So what is your first thought when you think of programming?
Electronics,
Okay.
like a robot maybe.
Series of codes.
Okay. David?
Your mind is programmed from a young age, and you usually act it through the rest of your life unless you get some help.
Right,
Wait,
good
you
point.
married to her.
We haven't talked about this. We haven't talked
Just
about
remind
this.
everyone to please speak up so we can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody over here?
I was thinking the same thing, like a computer program.
Okay.
Pavlov's dog.
There you go. That's
Conditioning.
close. That's conditioning. Mhm.
I was instantly looking at my family and thinking how we were programmed to be a certain way
Yes.
and to say things or not to say things. That's what I thought
That's
of.
programming. Okay. Karen?
Well, I know
You
what
know
we
a
talked
lot,
about,
so,
but
yeah.
my first really thought was how when you get your remote and you got to program the remote
Yes.
to talk to the TV.
Yes.
What kind of TV is this and stuff like that. You make sure that happens. But the other one I thought about is programming a computer. You know. And then of course I thought about, well, I thought that it's a difficult word for me because when God was showing me these things in the beginning and I just had some resources but not any like human help as much. There was talk with the satanic rituals use of programming. It felt so, and that's what we're talking about, whether it was coming from evil people doing it deliberately or just the way you were raised and stuff like that. But that word, I really had trouble with it because it sounded so awful. Like
Yes.
it felt like so much like you didn't have your own mind.
Yeah, like
That you were so, where did I go and I'm just this machine or something.
Right.
Like a machine that somebody got into my mind somehow. And that's made me feel sick about it since I heard about it years ago. And so I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad that God's talking about it because I think we mentioned this last time. We want to pull the plug on, the devil having the corner of, I am the great omnipotent
Yes.
Satan and I'm going to, like the Wizard of Oz, where he's acting like he's so big and bad when it's really just psychological
Yes.
torture and torment, which is bad,
Right.
but it's not like spooky and all that stuff. And so when I first talk about program, I still have this thing in me that goes, oh my gosh, what who's controlling my mind? What's going on? And it felt awful.
Right.
I think especially when you know, you're taught that when you come to Jesus that you have this freedom in Christ and you're like get to be this free person. There's this grace. And when I went to that conference and we were talking about stories, and my story was fairly recent, them saying you were basically set up, and when you said the word set up on a remote, like you have to get this to get that to
Right.
work. The only way the bad news in my current life could have worked is if I got set up, programmed essentially to walk
To
right
receive
into
that, and be okay with
walk
it.
right into a controlling situation, and
And then where's your free will? You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And that feels
it doesn't
awful
feel
to us.
free.
As, it feels awful to us as humans because God didn't design us to
No.
be programmed by anybody else. And we were supposed to be able to choose.
Okay. So, I'm drawing this up here, so programming is in the center. We're going to look at the positive and the negative. So we're going to put programming as neutral. Okay, so I'm hearing everything you say, Karen, but there are also positive things to program.
Right.
Okay, so let me give you the definition first of programming. It's a planned, coordinated group of activities or procedures. That's one definition. The second is to insert or encode specific operating instructions, or to set, regulate, or modify so as to produce a specific response or reaction. Okay, so if we look at positive, what can we think of? Just like Karen said with the remote. If you're not programming your remote to work with your television, every time you want to change a channel, you're going to have to get up and change it on the television.
Or get one of your kids to do like our parents did.
Yes. Okay, so the positive is what? For programming, convenience.
well, it's something that works. You program a computer so it can do functions that will
Make
help
things
you
easier,
make
yeah.
convenience and that function. They can figure out math
Input
much
two
quicker
functions.
than we can.
Also, just to how to live in society, there's, when you're teaching kids, you know, we did sign language for our kids for a few key things, like I'm all done, so they didn't, you know, whine. And now to this day, I can just hold my hand to my chest and they'll remember to say please or thank you. You know, like as you're leaving someone's house, I'll just go like this and, oh, thank you so much for having us over. It's just like
cool.
it's a training for
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
behavior, or I don't know.
And you're bringing up a good point. When we were born, every single one of us, and we're babies, okay, we instantly become programmed, right? So baby cries, hungry, right? So they actually get something to eat, hopefully, right? They get milk from mother or from a bottle. Okay, so are they being programmed? If I cry, I'm gonna get fed.
They're programming themselves and you.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so if you're training a child, you can see that as programming too. They're learning right from wrong. They're learning all the different things. We learn all these things by being taught, being programmed. The brain takes it in and says, yes, okay, that's good, that's good. And so if we didn't have programming, would we be able to function? Not really,
No,
right?
we just flop around, really.
Yes. So it's not only for convenience and functions like a TV or a computer, but it's also for us.
Consistency.
Yes, so we learn how to function. Okay. Anything else on the positive? For right now, we can add to it later.
Training, or is that well?
I can add this to train, for training. And it's also for growth. Okay. Okay, what about negative?
First one I think of is control.
Okay. You mean like mind control?
Mind control, emotional control.
Anybody else?
I'm talking about when somebody else controls you.
Right.
You learn to
Understood.
control.
What else is negative about being programmed?
Well, it's hard to change if you've been programmed a certain way, to think a certain way. When you're very young, it's hard to change it because you don't even realize that's part of the programming, so how can you change?
Okay. One that I think of is if you're programmed a certain way, then guess what? You don't get to be who you are. Because you're being programmed based on what other people think is right and wrong. Or
Prisoner.
good and bad. What's that?
Prisoner.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna write prisoner. Can't be yourself. Or can't be fully you.
You really can't make your own decisions if you're programmed in a certain way.
Right.
You can make them, but they're usually bad.
No, but you don't even realize that your thinking is, like if you had this much thinking, it's only like you can only do half the top, but the other parts are decided. That's what I'm talking about, being under
You're almost
manipulation.
also lost, because if the same stimulus or things that programmed you, i.e. a controlling person, or even from your childhood, a parent, once they're not there, you just sort of flounder. You need somebody. You're almost insecure. You can't even make a decision without asking.
Well, that reminds me of
Dependent.
being programmed to be under,
Uh-huh.
to be under something. So
Oh.
that would fall under the
Emotional.
negative.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good though.
Brainwashing.
Mhm. That's,
Mind control.
okay, so let's go to the next thing. We can always add to this. Okay. So when I was researching this a little bit, I found this diagram. And I'll see if I can figure out a way to draw this so we can see it on video. It's actually a triangle.
You draw things big, okay, that's great.
I like this color. Pretty color. Okay. Okay, there's 3 things inside. Actually, you know what? That's not even big enough, Karen. It's not straight, but you get the idea. Okay, so personality is up here. Line here. Culture. Human nature. Okay. Now on this side, they have the programming. Okay, this is their kind of like the program part, and this is like inherited. Okay. So if you think about, let's think about a baby. We just had a recent baby in our family. Does anybody else have a recent baby that you can think of? Or not so long ago, a small child? Everybody got somebody in mind? Got anybody in mind? Think of your little kids. Jameson.
2 years ago,
Okay, Jameson or Sky.
3 years ago.
I'm thinking about Elizabeth. Niece just had a baby. Okay.
Sammy.
So, if you think about programming from looking at that child, okay, if you take that child, put in the family that it's in now, okay, and then we're able to put it into another family, what would be the same and what would be different? Okay,
The child's personality would probably stay the same.
somewhat. Mhm. There are certain things that are genetic, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
personality they actually have is inherent, but can also be acquired,
It could change too.
right? Okay, can also be, on this side of it, can be specific to being programmed. Okay, so let's take, you want to be an example, Karen?
Yep.
Okay, let's take Karen before she went to nursery school, okay, where she first encountered evil people, okay, that began to do some programming to her personality. Okay, first she came here with her inherent acquired personality, but then was affected by programming. Did she lose her personality? No. But guess what? Things change, right? Can you think of some of the things that changed in you? I'm sure you know certain things from that.
Well, the whole thing of my personality is not to be under. God didn't make me like that, but I was certainly then programmed to be under.
To be under,
You
okay,
can't
so
speak
I'm
up.
gonna-
You can't call evil what it is because we're going to switch it all around on you. So,
True you, without this,
right.
would have said what here? I'm not under,
Anybody but God.
okay? Not under anyone. Okay. And anybody else think of something in yourself that maybe you were programmed when you were small? How about not trusting adults? Could that be programmed in you? Don't trust an adult.
Yeah, it could.
I don't trust men.
Don't trust men. David, I know you had different experiences.
Don't trust anybody.
Don't trust anybody. Okay, Dee, Sam?
Over what? I know, I missed it. I don't know.
Things that that might have been programmed in you when you were little.
I think what was programmed into me when I was little, it seems good. So I think I held on to it and haven't been able to shake it,
Mhm.
is that when you're a good girl,
Mhm.
that you get rewarded so you stay good.
Okay.
So you don't make choices, you just do exactly what is expected of you, or, so you kind of stay in a box, an under box.
Mhm.
The problem is you're not sure quite when that is over.
Yes.
So you get to an age of 21 and you should be able to make your own decisions, but somehow,
You're still
You're
trying to
still
be the
under.
good girl.
right, always a good girl.
Mhm.
I see that really, I mean, I understand it's under, but I would, if you could maybe
No,
put
it's
up there.
something
But
extra.
it's like a box, it's like
Yeah, I was
putting it
gonna
in
put
a
a
box.
box, yeah.
Yeah, putting in a
I
box.
was
And so
actually
it
gonna
might
call
have
that.
started as a good
It's
thing, like in
confined.
other words, trying to keep me safe from harm. You know, always tell the truth, you know, don't wear too short of a skirt, or whatever, who knows, whatever the things were, or you
Well,
always
we,
your
you
manager.
don't air any dirty laundry,
Right,
and
never
you
tell
can't say
anything bad,
anything.
never
and-
say anything negative, only say positive things. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't ever say it.
Right, it's confining.
Guess you'd say that men are over women. You're beneath, that would be the same as
Being
under.
under.
It's a good
So-
example of under though, that's good.
Mhm.
Men are the kings, women are the queens. Or something.
And, well, you came from a different generation too, where men were out doing the working and women were taking care of the family and the home.
It's like Archie Bunker and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Mhm.
Oh.
Fathers are always right and you don't get a chance to question anything.
Mhm. Right. That's good. Okay, so how will we see this play out in the culture?
What do you mean?
What we're programmed and what is a given? What is?
Well, you're programmed to your specific culture,
Mhm.
your people group, your racial cultures, United States culture or wherever you live,
Mhm.
what country, and then all the groups within that country, and then your Christian culture or whatever your religion is, that culture. We were talking about the women having to wear the burqas and all that stuff. That's part of their culture,
Mhm.
that they're programmed that that's what they need to do, so that's what they do.
Right.
That's programmed.
Yeah, and I think these cross over. I mean, I didn't do a lot of research on this, but I can see like inherited would be what comes down through your family culture. You know, and that's already inbred in them, so they're, guess what, it's gonna be right, given straight to you. And I think about you, and you talk about sometimes with your mom and the southern culture and the hospitality, that type of thing. And Deanne with you in the church too, and what that culture looked like in your family.
And sometimes they fit really closely in, like in our family too, similarly with, it is a Christian culture that's gone for generations. I mean, there
Mhm.
hasn't, and it's a Mennonite culture of kindness, always showing kindness. You never speak up. It's a pacifist group. So
Right.
you never fight back.
Mhm.
You turn the other cheek at all times. And then you move it into a culture here from across the globe
Right.
and into a Christian church culture. You can see how you wouldn't stand up to
Mhm.
anything going wrong within it.
Right.
Because you show kindness and we're all one and come
Mhm.
beyond.
Oh, there's the musical interlude to go with what you just said.
Yeah, usually that means work. Unfortunately, right?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm waiting, I had to leave it on, I'm waiting on a phone call.
Okay, so I was even thinking like in your family too, like where the mother and the father place, or do you have a mother and father as a family? Or is it a single parent? Or do you have two of the same sex now, it seems like is in the culture? So you can see how, even saying that, how we have been programmed in our culture a lot, especially with our younger generation, is to accept homosexuality and same-sex marriage and all this. This is programming.
And sex outside of marriage, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's programming. But I grew up in a family with a mother and a father were my parents. And I had sisters. Okay, so that came into inheritance, but now I'm trying, the culture is trying to program me to say, oh, but this alternative family over here, that's fine, that's good, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so you can see the difference, right, between the inherited and what's been programmed. So with human nature, what can we see as, we could take even some of the cultural things and put them down in human nature.
I Actually, there's a
Right.
couple things that I've been reading about, and one of them's a fairly secular book, but it's just truth she's learned and research from Brene Brown, is that our human nature is to need love. We need love.
Okay.
And she's done this through all kinds of research. And also another author who is a Christian but doesn't write from that capacity, Henry Cloud, was talking about the need for relationship. You can't grow without relationship, one, and love, two. That's inherent. That's inherent.
Okay, so
That's
we'll
good.
say
Those are good examples.
love and relationship.
That's good.
Okay.
And that goes back into the studies, those Romanian orphanages and places where they were not given any love, but were
Right.
given food, drink,
Right.
water.
Yeah.
How they just completely almost became retarded.
Like no human connection.
No human
Right.
connection or touch.
Well, human nature too is that we all need God.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's inherited.
But what happens over here? Why I drew a zero? That we don't need God. Right?
Yeah, don't some faiths teach that you are a God?
Well, the number of God is 7, and the number of man is 6. So 666 is, I don't need God the Father, I don't need God the Son, I don't need God the Holy Spirit. So that shall be one time to teach to kids. So,
I'm gonna say we don't need or we don't
Right.
have needs.
mhm.
Okay.
So
That's
what happens then? We think we don't have any needs. We're open to anything, right?
We'll fall for anything. Or if you don't
Mhm.
believe in something, we'll fall for anything.
Yeah. Well, I can see the enemy over here
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
at work trying to program.
And also too, just the human natures. I think we are hardwired because God gave us a conscience
Mm-hmm.
to know what's good and bad.
Yes.
Even people who don't have them, it's just
Yes.
common grace that you know that you shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
hurt someone or
Right.
you
Right.
shouldn't do horrible things. So we all are given and we inherit in our humanness a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, but here we're programmed
Right.
to lack a conscience, either by damage or
Mhm.
abuse done to us, so that we
Right.
damage then the next generation.
Well, then there's no good and evil, it's all
Yeah,
good-ish.
the sort of
Yeah.
That gray area.
that the no what's it called when you don't have a relativism,
Mm-hmm.
moral relativism.
Mm-hmm.
If it's good for you, it works. If it's not, follow your own path to heaven.
Do
It's
whatever
also
feels
called postmodernism.
Well,
good. Yes.
Yes.
it's scripture that God placed in us a need to have God.
Yes.
We need God.
Mm-hmm.
There's that big empty place in us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We do. We have needs.
Including that, we are designed to worship something bigger than ourselves and beyond ourselves. And so inherited is that we're designed to
Worship
worship
God.
God, but then the program does, worship this instead. Worship
Creation
money
yourself.
or other people or, self.
That's a great example, Karen, because that's the same word for either side. We're created
Right.
to worship, and then we're programmed to worship something else.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's absolute fact that the human brain is designed to believe whatever we put into it. Okay, so you can see that from a child, just like when Sky was here yesterday. You tell her something, she'd believe it. She's 3 years old. Okay, so you tell her something, she's like, oh, okay. And she goes with that. I mean, if you tell a child that something's bad, I watch Matthew sometimes with Jameson, things that he says to him that are ridiculous, and Jameson believes it. So that you can see how you can be conditioned and programmed really easily as a child, because there's an innocence in, when we're little, and then as we develop, we realize that some things that we were told weren't true, and
One thing I think about, and it had bad consequences for us, was, don't you know that everybody in Sugar Valley thinks they're better than us?
Mhm.
And that actually affected us
It's
Yeah.
programming.
in every way.
We were programmed to
And
think
I still have this thing like it's back here, you know,
Yeah.
reminding me, you know, everybody else is better than you are.
Yeah, that's programming.
It's,
Well, the good news is that God can change that programming in you, rescue parts of you, and really, I cease to call it reprogramming because it's not that. God's taking us back to the beginning, okay, to where that happened.
Right.
So it's not a
it's
reprogramming.
almost like there's something there that's, it just hangs there, you know?
Those are parts.
That's,
It's parts of you.
Well, it's parts of it
Because they
plus that
believe it.
programming or the
Yes.
evil influence that goes with it. So all that gets separated out, keep the parts and get rid of the
Rest of it.
it.
Mhm.
That's the beauty of what God's doing. And I want to say too, you know, God created this perfect world so that the children we're supposed to be taken care of, and everybody was supposed to be safe under God, and it was idyllic and everything, so that these children could be programmed, and it was all going to be positive. But then sin entered, and Adam and Eve made their choice, and then it ruined everything because children are very vulnerable. But God never meant for it to be that they would ever be hurt
Right.
from it. But that was
And that's why I
That's
think he saved that terrible warning, a threat that, I mean, harm one of these and
right.
it's better to put
Mhm.
a millstone around your neck. I mean,
Right. That's how. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're still trying to go back and reclaim.
Mm-hmm.
God bring that about to restore all things, to reclaim what He originally planned for
Right.
people.
Okay, so the brain takes in whatever we feed it, whether it's positive or negative. Okay, your brain's still going to take it in. Okay, so our minds may not accept something that is heard consciously at first, but your brain still takes it in. Okay, so it's still taking it in and processing it. It has an effect. Okay, I remember that when Sam was little, it's like, you have to be careful what you put into your mind, what you see with your eyes, what you take in with your ears, because it becomes a part of you somewhere along the line. It's going in there and you can't get it out once it
It's true.
goes in. Okay, so
Especially images, it seems like.
yes, definitely images. Okay, so this is mental programming. When it goes in, you might reject it, but it's still going in. Okay, so what happens if that happens over and over and over again? First time you heard, hey, everybody in the valley thinks we're, you know, you're no good, or they're better than we are. Well, first time you go, after you've heard it 100 times. Well, of course, that's what they believe.
I don't know when the first time would have been.
Let's-
That's why I
yeah.
felt it.
Yeah. You would have heard it before you could even consciously think that that was a thought. It would just have been in the environment when you were a baby,
Mhm.
2 years old.
The thing about it is, people who say these kind of things, they don't think about what they're saying.
Right.
They don't realize,
Well, they were programmed. So they're saying what they were
Well-
programmed to, or what they believe.
And that's what computer programs do. They spit out the same
Yes.
answer every time. That's why you can rely on them.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're right.
And programming
Yes.
actually forms a belief system in you as well. So you program, and that becomes part of your belief
It's
system.
like an operating system.
Yeah.
System on a
Exactly.
computer.
I was going to ask you, can you think of something that you were programmed? Because your family.
Stay out of the way,
Okay.
go hide somewhere.
Hmm. The children were not to be seen or heard, right?
Mhm.
You were in the way. Yeah, how awful, right?
Mhm.
I heard
That's
that
awful.
too.
That is awful.
Seen but not heard.
But he's
They
saying
didn't even
it
wanna
wasn't supposed
see.
to be seen or
They
heard.
didn't want to see him
Well-
either.
Yeah.
How do you say that? I mean, I'm trying to.
No, you're right. I grew up with it too. I mean, I knew that in the culture, children are supposed to be seen and not heard. But he's saying we weren't supposed to be seen or heard.
Yeah.
Why'd they have you? That's awful.
Well, I think your mom felt differently about you for the most part, but then the rest of the family, it was like the children were in the way. Yeah, yeah. Okay. What's that?
What a shame.
Mm-hmm, really. Okay. What we think, feel, believe, and accept as truths are the byproducts of the programs that we have. Okay, so if you think about that, what you think, what you feel, what you believe, and what you accept as true. Okay. Are the byproducts of the programs. So it's not the program, but it's the product. It's the byproduct. So if I feel like everybody else in the valley is better than I am, that's a byproduct of the program that you received.
Of course, I know better now.
Like with David, if he believed that he was never to be seen or heard, that was the programming that she received. Right? Go sit down, shut up, and behave. So what do you do now? There's still parts of you inside of you that said, "Oh, I gotta sit down, be quiet, not say anything, behave myself." Right?
That's what I'm doing.
I see parts of you that go, "We want the heck out of here. We don't want to sit down, shut up, and behave.
Right,
We want to stand up, say a whole lot, and not behave."
yeah, now they wanna jump up on the couch.
And give it right back to you.
Give it right back to
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, you got some rebels in there. Yeah, so they were never allowed. Because that's the way you were programmed. Okay, so this simply means that all the negative and positive message that we have gotten what we received when we were children, up until now, were programs that were stored in our minds. That just makes me want to go, okay, God, go to all those programs in me and start, separating them out, keep what's good, get rid of things that aren't good, that are,
Can we erase the hard drive?
skewed or.
Start fresh.
New movable one.
Well, I want to keep what's good in my hard drive. I don't want to have to be totally programmed all over again. But God can go and separate all the programs
Maybe he
that
could
are
just
not.
delete the trash bin.
It's just so hard because you realize what a awesome privilege it is to be a parent. And how, none of us is perfect, so you can't do it well. You're going to do the same things
Yes.
that you had done to you, who was trying to do it the best thing you had.
But who else as a parent, there are probably some out there, but most parents believe that they're not going to raise their children like they were raised. Or they're going to do it better, or they're going to do it different, right? But there's always something comes right along with you,
Oh, yeah, there's
Yeah.
always something.
programming. Okay, so we're going to stop with programming there, move on to conditioning. So what's the difference between conditioning and programming?
I do not know.
They're very similar, actually. So I'm going to give you the definition of conditioning. Conditioning is a process of changing behavior by rewarding or punishing a subject each time that action is performed. That's conditioning. Okay, so think about children. Now, at first, children have to learn what's right and wrong. Okay, so if you have a child who's constantly doing what they're told not to, okay, don't run out in the street, little Billy, don't run out in the street, don't run out in the street. Okay, but they don't do anything about it. How do you condition that child not to run out into the street?
Spank their butt.
Right, there's a behavior,
They
there's,
used to really paddle them
mhm.
so they would remember.
So that's a punishment for that behavior. So that is how they are conditioned not to go do something.
There's like 4 different kinds of reinforcement. Or like negative reinforcement. My mom was the queen of positive reinforcement, so that's why I was like, good girl. I never did wrong because it's like put a
Because you
carrot
got
there
rewards.
and show me how to do it. So she pretty much used classroom techniques as mother.
Mm-hmm.
So she did,
Right.
thought that was really good, but it really doesn't get warmth and depth.
Mhm.
But it really is a well-managed home, let me tell you something.
Yeah. So can you see the difference between, you have to think about it, the difference between being programmed to believe something and then to be conditioned to do something.
Yeah.
Okay. So the doing and the believing, there seem to be different aspects of that. So I was just thinking about you, Mom, with being programmed to believe that everyone else that lived around you was better than you. Okay. Now, what happens when you go to try to do something out in the world, out in your neighborhood, and you don't feel like you can do it? right? Because of what you were programmed to do. Well, how do we condition you to move past that? How would we condition you to move past you believing, being programmed that you were not better than other people?
One way is read the Bible to me. It tells us in there.
No, but I mean, as a
Yeah.
child, how
Oh,
could,
as a child,
let's just say absence of God right now. How could we program you as a child? We've already programmed you to say, you're not better than anybody else, that they're all better than you. But you want to go, let's say, put something in the science fair, and you want to win. Okay?
So as long
But
as-
you've been programmed to say, well, I'll never win.
well, it's a funny thing. Even though that happened in my home, then I could see other things where, like the ability to sing, and my mom pushed us to get up there and sing and sing and sing.
Mhm.
So we were conditioned to that part of our life for
Right?
it to be important and for people to give us recognition.
Okay, so the
So-
reward was recognition for your singing ability. So even you were programmed to believe that everybody else was better than you. Well, in this area, I can excel or do better. So you see how you were programmed one way, but conditioned for something else. But maybe you moved around the rest of your life and thought, well, I can sing, but I can't do anything else better than anybody else. I'll
It would be
always
similar
here.
to the kid in the thing. Instead of talking about the road, you'd be like, okay, look over here, look at the swing set. Instead of talking about the road,
Mhm.
let's just go over here and play on the swing set all the
It's
time.
conditioning.
It's a condition to, distract. Well, you do it all the time with babies. They grab for something and you give them something else
It's a
to distract.
distraction. Yeah. Okay, the next one is an illusion. Well, this came up with you, Deanne, earlier.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to talk about illusion and delusion. So what is an illusion?
It appears to be a certain way,
Okay,
but it's actually not.
okay. That's actually a really good definition. It's a distortion of the senses. Okay, so yes, it's going to appear a certain way, but it's also how your brain normally organizes and interprets sensory stimulation. So the illusion of, okay, this room is yellow, I have curtains. That the illusion is, this is what my senses are telling me.
Well, I want to read the definition from that Tuesday night. It says, something that deceives by producing a false or misleading impression of reality.
Right.
Read that again.
Something that deceives by producing a false or misleading impression of reality. So I don't think the room being yellow is an illusion, that's
No, I didn't finish
true.
it.
Oh, did I interrupt you? Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Just add into it. So the rest of the definition was, though illusions distort reality, they are generally shared by most people. Okay, so they do distort. Illusions do distort.
I
So-
didn't know that the shared by most people thing.
So I can say, well, my room appears yellow, but maybe when I turn the lights on, it's actually a different color. I just thought of one that I experienced with parts of me is when I opened up the door and saw my grandfather standing there naked. Okay, to me at 5 years old, I thought, oh, well, he's taking a bath. Because they had no indoor plumbing at that point, so they took a bath in a big wash tub. So to
He was
me,
in the wash tub, right?
he was standing next to it,
Oh,
so I'm thinking, oh, he's just
Probably
taking a
big
bath,
bucket or something.
okay? But then later on, as these parts of me are getting free, they said, oh no, he was beckoning us to come in, saying, come on in here. Okay, so my illusion was, this man's taking a bath, I'm shutting the door. That's how I see my illusion, is what I thought was happening, but that's not really what was happening. What was happening is he was trying to get me to come in there.
This is weirdness.
Yeah.
So part of you probably goes with the illusion, because you didn't even remember that, your front part didn't remember that.
Yeah, I remembered that
Okay, so
incident,
then your
yeah.
front part then would carry that with her
Mhm.
as this is what happened. Oh my gosh, wasn't that crazy? I opened the door and there was my grandfather, but he was taking a bath. But then your parts, like your parts we're doing today. Now, we want to speak up with the
Mhm.
front part to the side and let them say, because they actually know what happened or how it felt. That felt uncomfortable and weird and awkward and bad.
Yeah. So my front part actually had the illusion, but the parts of me actually had the reality of, no, he
That's
was
a good
trying to
example.
get us to
Right.
come in there. So, I mean, that's I think a good example of an illusion,
That was a good
parts
example.
of us. So,
That's a good example. Thank you.
yeah. So, any more on illusions before we go to delusion? What's a delusion?
Dessert will help me.
Yeah, that's a good delusion.
That is because it's a false belief.
Okay, a delusion is a unshakable belief that something's, it's an unshakable belief in something that is untrue. Yeah. So you believe, and this, I really understood delusion from a long time ago when I went through nursing school in psychiatric nursing, when we talked about people who had delusions, and there were actually people that were in the hospital at the time, but they gave, you know, classic cases of I think it was a man who really believed he was a prince. I think he's well known. I don't know if he's still living now or not, but he believed he was the prince of a country. Well, that was totally untrue. And so even if they presented him with truth, papers, everything, he totally believed that he was the prince. You could not change his mind no matter what. Okay, and so that's how he lived. I think he was locked up in a mental institute, but he really truly believed that he was. And so you can think of people who say they're Jesus Christ. I totally believe I'm Jesus Christ. Well, they're not Jesus Christ, okay? But you can't prove that they're not. They will not believe it no matter what. Okay, so there's a lot of different mental illnesses and disorders that have delusions as part of that illness, okay? Can parts of us or front part of us have delusions?
Mhm.
Just like David said, dessert's good for you.
Isn't it?
It's good for some part of you.
Yeah,
Makes you
Actually,
happy.
oftentimes, at least in my own personal experience, you have parts of you that argue over it. One might hold on to something, like here I was talking earlier about my church, and I was set on a certain feeling, because we were talking about parts that had been damaged in that place. And then Dee said, "Oh, what church is it?" And then I was like, instantly, another part was going, "Oh, it's a really good church. Everything that happens there." And I go, "What?"
Yeah.
It's like they wrestle over a fact and
Yeah, that's a
go
good
around.
It's
example.
almost like you flip side to side, like you got one over here and one over
they turn
here.
opposites. You know, almost
Right.
like a yeah.
Like Two-Face on, what was that? Sam? Batman. Do you remember that character, Two-Face? So he had one side that was all distorted and one that was fine.
You're talking about my family.
No, I'm not.
We had a guy at the Lamb Center. It's really sad, and I'm thinking it can kind of stem from abuse too. I asked because I check people in for their name, and we track them. He won't tell me his name, and he has broken English, and then he keeps. Well, I won't say what he says. His name is, you know, effing queer. And I was like, come on, that's not your name, but that's what he calls himself. And so I refused to write it, so the director and I decided we're going to call him instead Forgiven Man. You know, we said, well, you're a good man. He's like, no, there's only one good man, and that was Jesus. I was like, okay, you're right. So we call him Forgiven Man. That's how we check him in now. And I keep saying, hi, Forgiven Man. So I'm changing his delusion. I'm like, snap.
Well, I believe that parts of us can carry delusional things. Not that they're fully delusional, just thinking about all men are bad.
Right.
Okay, so that's a delusion that not all men are bad. Okay, but you can't convince the parts that
Right.
that all men are bad.
The front part probably doesn't think so because it doesn't make sense that
Right.
it would be true, but the part might very well think that.
And you can see that with big generalizations, there tends to be some delusional material in that.
It's like looking at another human being, like the pastor or something. Everybody in the church would say, oh, he's a wonderful man. He's practically perfect, you know.
Well, how about all pastors are good?
That's a delusion.
That's a delusion.
But yet then there's somebody else that's standing there that knows the sin that he has committed. And it's like, yeah.
Mhm.
So, is that a delusion?
Well, and that goes back to programming too, because if we've been programmed to believe that the leaders in the church are all good,
And then they know more than you do.
and they know more than you do, so the
It's common
delusion
culture,
is,
Christian
becomes
culture.
that, you believe that, you live it, you grow up in it, and so then you go to them for advice, or you go to them, tell them your problem, they blank stare at you, and you go, what in the world?
Or well,
You think something's wrong with you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now we'd say, what in the world, how dare you do that? But before that, you'd say, oh, let me go
Something
back
wrong
to the
with
drawing
me.
board, let's go, that's why I said the hard to change. Once you
Yeah.
believe all pastors are good in the leadership and they know more than you do, then you're really, anything
then
can happen, bad
right.
stuff can happen and all this stuff, and you can't ever speak up about it or do anything about it. Like your mind wouldn't even go there, mine didn't used to.
And we operate in those delusions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe there's illusions along with that, because visually they can appear good and
Yes.
kind and well and no problems and,
Well, the more deceitful ones, I'm thinking
They're
of
really good at it.
my first husband. He was a corn hunters, and it was the pastor that he had it all going. So there was an appearance of good fruit. I remember that being one of the first things when God took all the covers off and revealed what was going on. I was like, well, how did that happen? Because I see this, what I thought was good fruit, but it's really coming from
It's
a
an
rotten place. So
illusion.
that was a cover up, fake. That was fake, but it was an illusion of good fruit. And it wasn't actually fruit of the Holy Spirit. It was, let me
right.
act like this so I can get away with this other stuff. Whatever it was. But it's hard to detect.
And sometimes we participate actively in making an illusion of our own lives. We're broken, but we're gonna make sure that our house looks Martha Stewart and we look like shining stars so that no one can see how broken we are. I mean, that's so prevalent in Christian culture.
Yeah, that's,
And I was, what you said earlier about what was going on in your church about the guys going around taking pictures and things like that, I thought, and then the response of that, your father and the people in the church, I thought, well, that's delusional, but he's a good man. So that's not gonna change the whole idea of who they believe this person is, even though you're telling them,
The truth.
sure,
you have
they're
material,
facts.
you have evidence, you're saying, no, look.
He's a bad guy.
You know.
Watch him follow
And the
him.
thing is that is illegal. You can't take somebody else's picture without their permission. If they say, don't take my picture, you have to stop. Okay, because there's legal ramifications for that. So to say, oh no, but they're a good man, or that's a good person, or whatever, you're taking the evidence and they're still not believing it.
that's a
That's a
delusion. That's a
delusion.
delusion that everybody in church is good. And that's how sexual predators or any
Yes.
kind of predator
They
get
infiltrate.
in
Yeah.
church.
They infiltrate, yeah, they do. Okay, so let me just say this about delusions. They're irrational beliefs that defy normal reasoning and remain firm even when overwhelming proof is presented to dispute it. That's strong, isn't it?
Remember, Karen, the picture, the unhappy me at Disneyland?
Yeah.
And my mom kept saying I had a wonderful day. I'm like, I seem to remember it was horrible. And I went and got the pictures. Remember, I'm like,
And the picture, you look terrible, and you
almost
showed it to her, and
cried.
she's like,
oh, that may be the picture, but I know you had a good time. Like,
That's
like
a
there's
delusion.
overwhelming proof that it looks like somebody peed in my cereal and telling me sunshine and smile.
You know that phrase too?
Okay. Okay, now with mentally ill or with mental disorders, delusions are often accompanied by hallucinations, feelings of paranoia,
right.
things that have strengthened the confidence in the delusion.
That's a good distinction because parts don't usually have that
Right.
aspect of it, unless it's parts of a person that does have a mental,
Mm-hmm.
disorder above and beyond.
Yeah, I want to make
Exactly.
that distinction because there
That's right.
are delusions that are associated with mental illness,
Right.
but there are also delusions that I think that we all do every day.
Right.